Okay, so in this video, I'm going to go through the whole project. So it's going to be a very long video, but I will put on timestamps so that you can skip forward to where you need to be, or you can also, if you rewatch it, you can go to specific parts. So this is more of game mechanics than UI, but I need the UI to show off the game mechanics. So there is images that I've stretched or look a little buggy, like this one for example. That's just because I'm not a UI artist, I am a technical game developer, so I can put more effort into it, but it's more the game design aspect that I'm working on. So the items will go from left to right and then work their way down, trying to put themselves into the best position that they can. They also rotate, and you can rotate them yourselves. It says whether you can fit into the location where you're trying to put it. If it doesn't, it will go to the first one that it does. And then if I go into a inventory system, as you can see, the chests do open and close on the set on their own. If you go in and straight back out, it will do that. So you can just drag across to put things into the inventory and take them out. And in fact, I'll move this one down here. You can also deposit gold and withdraw gold down here. So deposit to, let's say I want to withdraw 23,111. You can only remove 2 because that's all that was there. And then each chest has its own inventory, as I will show off later. You can set that. You can also drag items so that they can be in a different slot. If you pick them up off the ground, they'll always go in the first one for partial stack, but you can just drag them together if you don't want the extra space taken up, but it's the option. You can have it either way. Also the weights are working completely fine now, as previously they were a bit buggy. Another thing that I have that's working quite well is the equipment system. So you can just equip. It doesn't show the amount that you've got there, but if you unequip, it still has. And if you go to equip a different thing that goes in the same slot, it will just swap out, no problem, as you can see. And then I can equip pretty much everything. Chest, shield, and then obviously you can always unequip and equip rings. Everything has its own slot, it works correctly, and you can unequip it all, it'll go back into your inventory, and the weight will always change correctly. And then the last thing that I've got to show off is the shop system. So you can see the price. This is the price for the full stack, that's the price for the full stack. Just to show that the prices are different each way. So if I sell one, basically, I thought I had the same, sorry. Bear with me one moment, I'll just pick one more up. Helps if I don't do that. So then, there we go. So that's double the price because everything that you sell is half the price of the shop. A lot of the items are just worth 2 because that's the base value of an item. You set it when you create a new child actor. So if I do this, it'll go into the first available slot. So I can sell all 4. Again, you can type higher, but when you go to sell, it'll only sell for 4. And then if I purchase, again, it's the exact same. It'll buy them all, and it changes the value for selling straight away. So that is all the mechanics in here. Gold gives you between 0 and 10, I believe, or 1 and 10. I'll double check that now because that's everything in the actual gameplay. So yeah, that's just a small bug because I just had to rework the way something is just to get rid of a bug. So it's just saying that it's already on there. So I will go through the inventory system. I'll show you what's in the level first. So these are all child actors of the item. Then the chests are just a testing. But if I go into their inventory, so basically the way it works, I've got a thing for basically if it's the player, it has a separate inventory thing. So you just tick a value so that it knows that it's the player. Then there's all these are the potions that are in this chest. So you just what I've got at the moment is a case of you drag an item in specifically. So I'll go into my list of items. So this is the main object item. Sorry, that's the item. That's the object for when it's not on the mod. So if I just drag a new one in here, and then I go back onto here, I can just add that, select that, and then one thing else that you have to do is tick delete so that it doesn't stay in the game world. Because if you pick an item that is exists somewhere else, because it has the same blueprint, it will just disappear when they basically converge on each other. And then it's the same with the shopkeeper. His inventory is out here. So it's basically the things can be hidden out of the map. They could be like 100 miles away before, and then despawn them. This chest is just selecting. The only thing that it doesn't do it for, because you don't keep the actual gold, it turns it into a value, is a case of you can put gold into chests, so you can just pick the same gold for everything from the world. And then this is the player character, so its inventory's got the is player. I have got it set so that is player is on default, so if like the person loads in through just a game start, it is the player, and you just turn off his player on everything else. So I'll dive into the actual inventory system now. So this is the actual component for the inventory system. This is where things start to get a bit complex, but if you just bear with me, I'll go through everything. So I'll go to the event graph first. So simply what it does is, because you can set the values yourself, the amount of columns and rows for everything. So like a chest has a smaller column and rows than the shop. One thing that I didn't show, I may have shown without actually saying about it, is the fact that you can scroll the menus. Yeah, I did do it with the ring. So you set them, and then it will resize at the beginning of play because everything will be different. It puts the items in. So if there's any items from the last play, it'll be able to pull them up. The delay is just to stop it from bugging, because on the next frame after resizing, then it'll go into this for each loop for anything that's a target, which is that array that you pick items to put in, will go into try add item. Now, and then on the check, it checks if it's day. That basically just means it'll refresh the actual UI whenever there's a change happened. So if I go into try add item, so first off, it makes sure the item object that's being picked up is a valid item object. If not, it just throws it all away. Then if it's gold, it'll do my gold function, and then macro. And then if I'm overweight, it'll do the overweight macro. And then if it's stackable, it'll do that macro. And then if there is a partial stack, so if it is stackable and it's true that it's stackable, it'll check if there's a partial stack through this macro. And then if there is, it'll add weight, because it has to add the weight of that it's being added. Because otherwise it goes into this one, which adds the weight anyway. And then I tell it that it's dirty, so it can refresh to show that you've added more items. So then say if there isn't a partial stack, you'll have to add an item, so it adds it into the array and make sure that there's room in my array on the columns and rows to make sure it can fit in there. If there is room, then what it will do is try and add, well, it will add the item because it knows there's room, and then it'll add the weight there. So if we go, and once it's gone through and it hasn't found room, it will rotate, go back through with its rotated form to try and fit in. And if it fails, it will rotate again, and then basically drop it. But that makes sure when you pick it up again, once you've got space, it's the right way around to start off with. Yeah, and these ones just skip along to the, it doesn't do anything. Like, it's not being added, so you don't need to worry about it. So I'll go into the is gold quickly. So basically, this just checks that it's got the tag gold, and if it does, then it just adds it to your gold. But that's a simple one. So then we've got overweight. So this basically just gets the weight of all the items that you're picking up at once. For example, if you've got like 6 potions that you're eating at once, just make sure that that plus your current weight doesn't go over your max weight. It's a bit of crosswise there, but I figured it would have to be a not, and then it's still a bit confusing because it'd still be going, well, it'll be true to false, false to true. So I'll just have true, true, false, false. Makes sense. And then we've got I'll go back on try it. Yeah, so then we've got, is it stackable? Basically just checks the value. Is the item object stackable? Yes. Partial stack basically goes through every single item in the array to check if it's got the same name. If it has, then it checks to see if what item slot it's in, because it needs to know that item slot, and then it breaks because it's got that item slot, and then just make sure that it's got the condition of partial ticked, just in case, because if it's false it will have basically go into the false. If it's true it does this, and then puts it to the true. I'm just speeding up a little bit because I feel like this is taking a while, so I do apologise for anyone that wanted a bit more information. So this just makes sure the tile is valid for things to go in. I'll just go from the left to the right now. So for each index, basically gets the X tile and the Y tile. It just goes through every single tile, so that you can make sure that it's empty or full. Index to tile basically makes the index itself, so that's the array index, into the actual tiles that you see. Available room I've gone over. Oh no, so yeah, this checks that as a valid tile, goes from tile to index, so that goes reverse from the index to tile, and then checks the item. If there's no valid item, then it returns false. If there is a valid item, true, it also returns, well, it returns the node to continue, sorry, it doesn't return false. But it's a case of, because they do different return nodes, they do separate things. Get item at index, basically it just makes it's exactly what it says on the tin. I mean, the naming on these basically are all the same, the things, so all self-explanatory. So that this is basically gets everything and puts them in the tiles properly in the correct place. Is stackable, went through that. Add weight. So yeah, the add weight is just a simple, gets the quantity and the weight and adds it to the current weight, and then sets the current weight. Yeah, so that's everything in here. I've got different values. I've got constants, public and private. A few of them, like this, should really be in public. I just need to move it across, and this is a public one again. So there's a few that I just haven't moved across. And then we've got a lot of UI systems. It's a UI heavy game mechanic, but it's just so that you can, these can all be beautified later on. This was more about getting that core structure in, getting it working. So this is my X and Y's for my tiles, and then the lines, so where it starts and ends when it draws the lines in the inventory. Just simple structures. So I'll move from the component over to the inventory system. So the first one, this is the actual inventory, so it's got the text at the top, and then this is the actual inventory in here. So what it does is on spawn it initializes through the inventory grid. I'll go into that in a moment. So if we go into the text, it's just a simple get the values from the inventory component, and that's the same on that one. And then if you drop an item it goes to the game state item dropping that I created for being able to drop an item. I'll just skip over to that because I'll just show that now. So it basically just gets the location, gets a forward vector, so it drops in front. I didn't show off the dropping actually, so I will do that. And then it's got a case of whether it ground clamps or whether it just falls from the sky, and then it spawns it once it knows where to spawn. So back into the inventory. Then it also has, I just have to have this to tell it that the event has been handled when I click. So I will just quickly show the item dropping as well. So if I go here, you can just drag and drop, and then you can also just press drop, and that drops straight on top of the other item because it's telling it to drop in the same location. Then, so the inventory was shown off. It's the inventory grid. So this is just that grid system that you saw over the inventory. This has a lot of stuff in it. So we're currently on the thing. So this just paints the lines. And it makes sure, checks whether it's the shop or not, because it gets the payloads and checks if there's room. And then it draws them in with the correct dimensions, because you set the dimensions as well for the tiles separately. So if we go on to initialize, because that was what's in the inventory system, I'll just close these. So initialize, what it does is it gets the inventory component from your inventory UI and then sets that in this UI. It sets the tile size from the inventory system UI, and then gets columns and rows from the, basically that gets that from the component, and then it sets the size, makes the lines, and then it refreshes, which is another thing that I'll get over to. So we will go on to refresh because that's the one that's here. There is a bit of jumping back and forth. In fact, we can go on to make lines first because that one's there. So this basically is the actual physical drawing of the lines. So it makes the structure line. The paint is the painting of the lines. This is like the background, getting the lines, setting what the lines are, so it knows for definite. So then if we go to refresh, it basically gets rid of all the items in the inventory grid, so there will be no items there. Then it gets every item that's there, meant to be there, and then for each one it creates a new item widget, gets the item object and sets its tile size to make sure it's the right tile size, got the earning player, it's got the quantity, and then is player, and there's the shop, just because the is player has a different view and the shop has different, like basically it's monetary values for them, and then you've got to make sure that the value is correct for them as well, and then it adds the children back to make sure it's the correct children, and then it auto sizes it because it's got to make sure that it's the correct sizes, sets the position with tile size, tile location, sorry, the location times the size to make sure it starts at the top corner. Get payload is what happens on drag and drop. That's why you had to have the click on mouse down to ignore that, because it's in here, so it gets the payload from it, whatever you click on or start to drag, sorry. Item removed, so this is just telling it what to do with the weight, and to remove the item from the inventory component as well. So like when I drag and drop, or right click drop, and this is telling it to check where I drop, to whether it, like if I'm dropping in the inventory, is there room on that specific place that I'm dropping, and then if there is, add. If there's not, try to add it somewhere else. If it can't drop it, add it somewhere else, drop it. So preview key down, that's just showing off the rotation, and then so whilst I'm grabbing it, it shows it can be re-rotated. Sorry, and then this is just to say which tile it is in, so that it doesn't go have like the green or red box. So say these are the tiles. If my mouse is there, it doesn't start there. It starts at the top corner of the tile. So this is just whilst it's dragging to check which tiles it's in from the mouse and tile to make sure it's correct. It gets the dimensions. Then the check for its room is basically the available room from the component. Event graph is just simply telling it whether I'm dragging or dropping. Just because it's a different UI, it's on top of the other UI because it's in its designer, to make sure I didn't do anything wrong, basically, for each loop. It's just because you can't actually have a loop like this to find the elements, so I created this to save time, rather than having to do this every time that I wanted to do a for each loop with my target map. Undown, yeah, so this is just the undown thing again. Gone through the maintenance. This is the actual items themselves. It adds the actual thing, so that's the price in the bottom corner. That's the text. That's fine. I'll just not save this. There we go. And then so the actual icon of the image, and then the quantity. If I go into graph, so gets the price. So basically, it checks if I'm in the shop. So it won't show anything if I'm not in the shop, basically. And then if it's the shop, full value. If it's player, half value. And then if you go into the icon visibility, just basically saying whether you can see the icon, which is like the price, like the little gold value. So when it initializes, it refreshes. So it's the same as the image grids refresh. This is a different refresh, but it's basically the same thing. Just make sure the white width and height is correct, because you can have it different tile size and different things. So if you want the shop to be like really big and visible, you can blow that up to a bigger size, and it won't cause any issues. So remove a widget. So it's basically removing all the widgets. So if I right click sell, purchase, so any of the right clicks, basically it removes them rather than staying hovering. So this is just to like create those widgets when you right click on them, and this is just drag and drop operations. Again, just to detect if the drop dragged on the actual item, so it knows to pick up this item basically, or a different item. And this is just getting the item objects icon to make sure it's the right icon. So what I'll do now that I've gone through that, I'll just quickly do my equip and unequip. So this is my equipment. It's got the actual equipped item. It doesn't really do much in here, it just gets the third person to make sure it's got the player information, because then these are all spawn transform is just for dropping items. So all the information is in here. So you've got your drag and drop, you've got your payload, your icon image, and then it's got its refresh, and basically it just gets the information. So you can drag and drop them out of the image as well. You don't have to unequip. You can just drag across rather than right clicking. So yeah, I will just jump into the items now. There is more UI in each one of these, but I'll just go over to the way the items work. So blueprint item, basically it just makes sure that things are valid, and then it's telling it to set the default object. If not valid, destroy it. If it's an item that I want to delete, destroy it. Sorry. So that's the items that I put into chests just to save on CPU and GPU, I guess, technically. So then if it overlaps, it tries to add it to your inventory. If it's successful, destroys the actor to stop you from picking up multiple and bugging it out. So a default object is just a simple return node, but it's got the item object information. So then if I open up a child, what this does is if I construct the item, I get to do all this. And this is what causes the problem of having two of the same item on the, selecting them in the inventory components, is because it's got itself as the outer for the object. So if I jump into the item object, it's just simply, it's got all the values to show off. And then this is just a quick, easy rotate. It's literally all there is. Obviously it's got its dimensions to make sure things are right. And it's item class and its icon. So if I go back into the HP potion, so you literally set the actual things all in here. So it's got the values. So if I go into my gold, it's got value between 1 and 10. So that's as simple as those are. Got some icons, which are basically just the right way around and rotated, and then that's off textures that I made. That was just a test from somewhere else. I'll just delete that. So if I go back out into the inventory and go on to the storage, so this blueprint basically, it's just simple, like you go close to it and it'll tell you that you can open it. Yeah, it won't show it because it's on screen, and it's invisible unless the character's up to it. So you can, it basically just adds through to the viewports, removes from the viewport when you go out of the area. This is just the animation for opening and closing the box. So if we go into, so these are, I'll just do these ones because I forget, that's the putting gold in and out. So you've got an edible text so that it knows the correct amount, adds to the box, removes from the character, vice versa for the other one. If it's more than the value, it basically just gets the value that is there. It doesn't need to get anything else. So this basically makes sure that you're only adding numbers. If it's not a number, it removes it. You can't put in letters. So it's as simple as that for them. And then this is basically just a copy of the inventory system. It's just, it needs to be a separate one on the other side for the boxes. And then this is just the prompt. This is just a simple prompt. There's nothing in the graph. The shop has a bit more to it, so it's pretty much the same sort of information that you're looking at for the boxes, just it's for the shop instead. And then so the buy quantity and sell quantity is basically just the same again as the boxes for moving the gold, except from instead of being gold, it's the quantity of items. And then I had to rearrange a few things to make sure the amount of gold was correct. Because I had it here because basically it sets the quantity, it stores the quantity of the item and then sets the quantity to the amount that you're moving, and then after it's done all that, it sets the quantity to the quantity minus the quantity that you sold. But I was setting the gold after changing the quantity, which meant the amount of gold was wrong, so I fixed that. So then it removes all, just in case there's multiple widgets, in case someone spams or something, it removes all of them when it removes it, not just itself. So purchase is just like the drop and equip. I will go back into the equip one actually, just bear with me because I didn't show off the way that I had to do that. Just close all these. It's just because I'm having to go through them all. Yeah, so with this it just gets the player, inventory, sets it as a reference, and the shop as a reference. And then it creates quantity if there is a stack. Basically, if there's more than one in the stack, and then basically it's just the normal buy sell. So yeah, I'll just quickly go out into the inventory and equip. So basically the equip and unequip have this. I think I did forget to show it off. Unfortunately, I haven't found a way to shorten this down. So basically it checks the name of the weapon, well, name of the item, and then so weapon, so you can have like the saber, you can add other weapons as long as you give them the weapon tag, well, name tag, then it'll go into the weapon slot. This is shown not on this one. Did I do them separately? Bear with me. Oh no, because yeah, so it's because it's potion, so the health potion and the mana potion. I was looking for 2 equals, but that's the old way that I did it. So then I'll just close all them. Then go back into the shop. So the shop inventory, again, it's the same style. There's not much going on. It's just a case of it's a copy of the inventory. Just had to be a separate one for the shopkeeper, because there's a few things that were different. I think that's everything. This has been a long video. If you watch it all the way through, thank you. And enjoy your day.